everybody. Welcome to the morning show. We're coming to you today on WJOPLP Newburyport at FM 96.3 on Channel 9 and a Newburyport Community Media's YouTube station at ncmhub.org. I'm your host, Mary Jacobsen, and this morning I am just delighted and honored to welcome Jason Ianuzzi and Dr. Lynn Eustis here to talk about Cantemus Chamber Chorus's upcoming performance of composer James Whitbourn's Annalies. This will be performed in Newburyport at St. Paul's on January 20th at 7:30 p.m. and again in Swampscott on January 21st at 4 p.m. at Congregation Shirat Hayam. Let me introduce you first to Jason. He joined Cantemus in 2022 as their artistic director. He has a distinguished background of choral conducting, vocal coaching, music direction, and extensive knowledge of the choral orchestral repertoire. Jason has years of experience as a director, vocal coach, and musical director for opera and musical theater productions. He has a bachelor's degree in music education from Westminster Choir College and a master of music degree in conducting from Carnegie Mellon. He currently also leads the highly regarded choral program at Lexington High School, which I'm sure keeps him busy. Jason, welcome, and thank you so much for taking time to visit the morning show.
Good morning, Mary. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. Well, let me introduce you now to Dr. Lynn Eustis, soprano. She's currently chair of voice and associate professor of voice at Boston University, where she joined the faculty in 2012. She holds the Doctor of Music degree in opera from Florida State University, a Master of Music degree in opera from the Curtis Institute, and a Bachelor of Music degree in vocal performance from Bucknell University. She appears regularly as a soloist with many professional organizations, which have included Chorus Pro Musica, the Tulsa Oratorio Chorus, the Dallas Bach Society, and many, many others. Along with the Westminster Williamson Voices, she also appeared as the title soloist in the United States premiere of Annalies in 2007. So it's very exciting to have her here. Lynn, thank you so much for taking time to visit us on the morning show today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much, Mary, for having me.
Oh, totally my pleasure. Well, let's start at the beginning. For those who may be unfamiliar with this choral work, perhaps you could start us off by describing what the work is based on. And since most people in the United States know her by a shortened version of her name, who Annalies was.
Sure. The Annalies of the title refers to Anne Frank. Her given name was Annalies Marie Frank. Of course, we know her as Anne, or sometimes Anna. And it's sort of a difficult work to categorize. Some call it an oratorio. It's not really an oratorio. It doesn't have characters per se. It doesn't really have a plot, although it does have a sort of narrative to it. But what it is it's a 70-minute choral work based all on the writings of Anne Frank from her diary. And sometimes people say that Lynn sang the role of Anne in the work, and that's a bit of a misnomer as well, because really almost all the words sung by either the chorist or the soloist are Anne's words. I guess there is, though, an impression when a beautiful soprano soloist sings words in the first person, and does so in a way which, can convince us that she is at that moment representing Anne. So it's very interesting because at times the chorus themselves represent Anne as well. So tricky work to characterize. Whitbourn himself said that as he worked on the piece and went through his various stages of premieres and so on and so forth, the more he met the people that were important in Anne's life who survived the Holocaust and folks who are mentioned by name in the diary even, he really began to feel that it was a very personal piece and sort of like he was composing music as a memorial to Anne and the others who had perished. And I thought that was a really interesting take. And having worked on the piece several times now, I'd say that that's pretty fitting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems so. And I understand the distinction you're making. I think, of course, it's all the words of Anne Frank, but I think there might be a natural tendency when you have a soloist performing to see this as the individual speaking. So that's an interesting distinction that you point out, Jason. Well, tell us a little bit more about the composer. He's a British composer, James Whitbourn. What he's known for and what motivated him to undertake this composition.
Sure, I'll say a bit, and then maybe Lynn can also pipe in because she knows James better than I do. But James Whitbourn is, as you said, a British composer. His output is not entirely, but largely in the choral vocal realm. A lot of music on church themes, a lot of influence of sort of Anglican church music. In fact, even Annalies piece, which is set in Amsterdam during the Second World War, even invokes some plain chant, but to great effect. And Annalise is his largest and probably best known work to date. But he's done film scoring and he's done other sort of cantatas and so on and so forth. My experience with Maestro Whitbourn was that when I did the piece with my high school students, we were the first, and as far as I know, the only high school now that has done the complete Annalise, which is a bit of an undertaking, but a very exciting project we did in 2016. And I had reached out to Whitbourn and asked him if he might Skype with us. Of course, there was a considerable time difference and so on, and my classes all meet at separate times, but he gave us several hours over the course of several days where he would hop on to Skype and talk with the kids and answer their questions about the piece. And I found him to be very generous of his time and spirit. And he talked a lot about his inspiration for the piece being connected with Melanie Challenger, who is sort of the unsung hero of the piece. She's the librettist. And she had the idea for a piece like this, which would, again, not in the sense of an oratorio, try to tell scene by scene how things unfolded in the secret annex, but really give an impression of Anne as a writer, to give an impression of Anne as a young woman coming of age, which I think certainly her diary does, and to give an impression of Anne from the point of view of sort of distilling everything that Anne wrote in the diary, which is a lot, down to these really, he calls them sort of spiritually charged texts, these uncanny observations that one would not expect from a 12 or 13-year-old about life and about hope in the face of difficult circumstances and so on and so forth. And I think, for a lot of people who know Anne Frank's story, it's not, what happened to Anne and to her family is unfortunately not unusual. She's one of literally millions of Jews during the Second World War who went into hiding, were ultimately captured, imprisoned, tortured, and ultimately broken. But I think there's something hopeful in Anne's story, and that she's left behind this record which which essentially defies all odds and says, the diary should not have survived. There's only an accident that some Nazi soldier didn't pick it up and destroy it. So, and now today we have this beautiful, very well written account of what life was like for Jews in hiding. And I just think that's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, and it strikes me as you're describing, of course, the diary is something most of us I think are familiar with at this point, but this choral work is a new and a different way of encountering Anne. And it also means we're encountering her in a communal setting. Rather than reading the book as individuals on our own, we're with an audience of other people listening to the musical setting of what the librettist has selected to communicate these different settings and stages, and the kind of the wonder and the wisdom of Anne Frank's wisdom and her hopefulness. So thank you for that, Jason. That was really interesting. And how great that James Whitbourn took the time to Skype with your high school students. What an extraordinary experience for them. They must have been thrilled. Well, Lynn, did you have anything you wanted to add? Because I know you've performed this work a number of times, I believe.
Oh, I mean, there's so much I could say about this. I will remain quiet until asked to speak.
Okay.
But James is a dear friend, and I will say that having performed the premiere with him at Westminster Choir College way back in, I think it was 2007. The score has changed a little bit since then, it's been interesting to see. The score that I'm using is still just a printout of the PDF he sent me. It was before it was published. And there were some changes made to it after that performance. So that's as a direct result of what we did that day, which has been interesting. He and I have talked a lot over the years. This is actually the 8th time that I'm performing this work, which is, it just boggles my mind. But we've spoken many times about the soloist and whether the soloist really is, I mean, certainly she represents Anne, and I don't sing any words that are not Anne's, and the choir has there are a few little things that are not Anne's words, but it's impossible not to be personal about it in my approach to it. And so I usually describe it as the title soloist, but it's definitely not meant to be a character. That said, I always perform it memorized because it just seems I want to be direct in my communication of this incredible text. And it's very special based on depending on who I'm performing it with. That performing it with Jason's high school students a few years ago, there's something so special about hearing Anne's words coming out of 15 and 16-year-old girls. There's a place in the middle of the piece where the soprano section and the soloists go back and forth, and we're sharing the words, and hearing those girls sing those words I still get choked up thinking about it. It was so immediate, and it was really a special experience. Every performance of this piece is special for that reason.
Oh, I'm absolutely certain of it, and how amazing. I noticed you put your hand over your heart when you're describing the experience, and that's how it's easy to imagine that, absolutely. We should talk a little bit about the timing of this performance. Jason, I know that you commented that you actually programmed this some time ago. And yet, as you said, never anticipating how terribly relevant the scheduling of this for this time on the global stage would be. So could you talk a little bit about the kind of enduring relevance of Annalies and the January performance dates that you selected for a reason?
Sure. I mean, I think Annalise is certainly a piece for our time. It's a piece for all time. I think it's a piece which will live on in the repertory, which is very exciting to be part of its sort of early stages, as it were. Yes, but back last January or so, I had approached Cantemus about potentially programming this piece. First of all, it's a marvelous piece. I thought it would give us a chance to really sort of dig our teeth into some challenging repertoire in terms of subject matter, to really challenge our audience. The board, as I'd mentioned last time we spoke, has also committed to expanding our repertoire and expanding our audience. And I thought, what a marvelous way to invite in a whole new audience who might have points of connection with the Anne Frank story, but not necessarily with Cantemus. And honestly, what I was seeing, not so much on the world stage, but just here in the US, a very frightening, I won't say reemergence because it's always been there, sort of under the surface, but I've seen essentially a cloud of white supremacy and neo-Nazism, not just being under the surface, but literally becoming part of the public discourse, where you hear sound bites from the news and you think, what is it? Where is this country I'm living in? So It's very frightening. And I just feel like, in this age of social media is a wonderful tool for us to communicate, but it can also be abused and misused and mishandled by those who would deny the Holocaust, who would say that these things never even happened. And so I thought, what a great opportunity to use our voices, quite literally, as Cantemus to remind folks about this. Yeah. And so, typically Cantemus has a series of concerts that happens in early December, often holiday related, not always, but often connected to Christmas and other wintertime holidays. And we thought, if we're going to do this work, it's a sort of long, slow burn to get it ready, because it is a hefty piece. And also doing it in early January instead will give us an opportunity to make a connection with Holocaust Remembrance Day, which happens, I believe, on the 27th of January, yes. About a week out.
Yeah.
And I also insisted that we attempt to move out of our normal framework for performance, which is essentially at a Christian church, which has lots of advantages and acoustics and so on, familiarity and comfort and so on and so forth. And if we're going to present the piece, to attempt to find a temple somewhere in the North Shore that would work with us. And we're just absolutely thrilled that congregation Shirat Hayam has agreed to and jumped in with both feet. It's a beautiful, beautiful space, marvelous acoustic. It's a very large congregation who will get the word out about the piece. And I just think you talked about the singing of the piece as a communal experience.
Yeah.
When we finished the piece with my high schools in 2016, I got a lot of emails from parents. One in particular stands out in my mind. She said that her grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and that, you know, hearing, I'm going to get emotional, but hearing the piece was a very, it was a very engaging and total body experience for her. And I just think, what a marvelous opportunity. Imagine the feeling in the room, especially now, for folks who have such a strong point of connection with Anne and feel that, you know, as Anne said herself, she felt that her friend Annalies represented all of the Jews and all of their plight during the Second World War. And certainly Anne has become a figurehead for this terrible, terrible occurrence, the Holocaust. But yeah, these are the reasons that we chose to do the piece. And quite honestly, just a chance to do the piece with Lynn again. I would not have moved forward with the piece if Lynn said she was not available, because we've been really enjoyed our time together. And in fact, I'll just do a little aside here that in 2021 we had planned to do the piece again with my high schoolers on a European tour that was going to finish in Amsterdam, and we had hoped to actually sing the piece in the Vestekirche and do a recording and so on and so forth. It all got COVIDed out, unfortunately, as so many dreams did. But this is a way for us to sort of relive that magic and hopefully have a wonderful experience while doing it.
Well, and maybe you can reschedule,
Absolutely.
which would be great. Well, Lynn, let's then talk with you a little bit about, I'm curious to find out, since you were title soloist for the U.S. premiere, and it's the first time this piece had been sung in the United States, I'd love to find out what that experience was like for you. And you've done it a number of times since then, and that was 2007. I'm also just curious to find out if your understanding of the work or your response to it, your interpretation of it, has evolved in the intervening years.
That's a great question. I mean, being involved in the premiere was an enormous honor. And the three of us, James Whitbourn and James Jordan, who was also conducting the performance, we had quite the time putting the piece together for the very first time, especially in the chamber version, which was actually the first time that chamber version was ever performed. And as the clarinet part was added later after that performance, because we just needed one more instrument. And we all realized that after the fact. To tie things together just intonation wise for the choir. But it's been coming back to it over and over, this piece. I mean, I went through a situation in 2014 where I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And it was a horrifying experience for me, but everything's good now. But
good. I'm glad to hear
my
that.
first performance right after the surgery was a performance of this piece here in Boston with Chorus for Musica. And I was desperate to do it, and I there was no way I was going to cancel it. But being out there and singing these incredible words and the bravery in Anne's words and has stayed with me for years. I mean, I did a number of performances of this piece right after that. The score had just been published, the recording had just come out, everybody was doing it. And for a while, I did a lot of performances of it. And right during that very difficult time for me personally. So this piece just really resonated for me, and I, you know, her strength in the circumstances that she was in and at the age that she was were just so inspiring to me over and over. And I thought, if she can live with that kind of uncertainty, so can I, you know. And that came back, of course, during the pandemic, thinking about that, the uncertainty of all of that. So it's every time I pick up this piece, these words mean something a little bit different to me. And that's been a really, really wonderful privilege to repeat it over and over again.
Well, I can hear the personal connection that you have with the choral work, but also the historical person of Annalies, of Anne Frank. And let's give credit to your courage and your inspiring story that you were committed to and found the meaning in the work, and using that inspiration to go ahead and perform even after you were dealing with a very challenging health situation. And by the way, I'm really glad that you're okay now. So
Thank you so much, Mary. Just celebrated 10 years, so
Oh,
I'm
that's
pretty excited.
wonderful. That's
Terrific.
wonderful. And since it's so meaningful to you, this is a fitting way to celebrate the 10 years with
It
another
really,
performance.
really is. I'm incredibly grateful to
Yeah.
Jason and so excited to do the piece with Jason again.
Great.
It'll be so great.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Jason, I'm curious to find out because as you probably know, the Newburyport Choral Society, which I'm a member of, sang this a number of years ago when George Case was our director. And it's emotionally challenging for everyone who engages with it. And I'm just curious to find out, what are the Cantemus singers telling you about their experience of rehearsing Annalies?
Yes, it is that it's emotionally challenging. A lot of people who sung the work in the past have commented that there are sections that are quite difficult to get through in performance. I think in particular about the the text which Anne wrote about time in the annex, but Melanie Challenger used as a sort of bridge to what conditions were like in the concentration camps, which of course, Anne did not write in her diary when she was in the concentration camp that we know of. So it was a really stroke of genius to include those words, and I find that a very difficult passage to conduct because the imagery is quite striking. But the buzz in Cantemus is that they think this is going to be one of the best, if not the best, concert they've produced, and they're just really it's involving them not just in an intellectual pursuit, not just in a musical pursuit, but in a sort of heart pursuit.
Yeah.
And that they're taking the time to really meet the challenges of the material. Back in December, we had a little potluck dinner, and we watched a marvelous Academy Award-winning documentary called Anne Frank Remembered, which I would recommend to any of your viewers. It's a beautiful, beautiful portrait, which is more of a beginning to end, sort of life story of Anne and her influence and so on and so forth. And yeah, that really helps to set the context of the piece for folks. But that's not an easy watch. It's not something you pop some popcorn and sit down and have a good laugh at it while you're watching. It's challenging, but I think as artists, having that experience, building up that sort of body of memory, that sort of body of the history and so on and so forth, all of those things will inform our performance. So people are really excited about it. So of course, we hope to sell out, not just because it's an expensive concert to produce, but because a lot of work and heart have gone into this piece. I'm really encouraged by how things are going, and I just hope people will be there to see and hear it, because it's going to be pretty extraordinary.
It is an extraordinary piece, and it's extraordinary. And I know for me, it felt like an enormous opportunity and privilege in life to participate in it. And the audience responded that way as well. I can't wait, because now I get to hear it as an audience member. And I know other people from the Choral Society who are feeling the same way. We're really looking forward to it. And I love the way you put it, that it's a heart endeavor.
Yes.
Because, it's not the easy things to watch or to hear that make our hearts grow and expand and become deeper and wiser as human beings. It's the challenging ones. And so, well, what can I say? I'm really looking forward to it. The final thing I wanted to ask each of you was, what do each of you hope the lingering impact of Annalies will be on listeners and on yourselves?
You want to take that first, Lynn?
Sure. For me, it really comes down to this sounds so cliched, but art saves. It really, really does. And it saved her. Her writing helped her to get through what she went through. Our musical endeavors help us to get through what we're dealing with in life. And it's the power of art to help us endure things, but also to give us joy, to give us endurance, to bring meaning to our lives is just, it's boundless. So that to me, I hope that people will be inspired by her words and by James's terrific music. And I think it will hopefully change some hearts a little bit. Excellent. Thank you for that, Lynn. Jason, how about you?
Yeah, I think I would have to echo all of the things that Lynn said about people walking away with changed hearts. I mean, that's sort of my motto. I really feel like great art should impact the audience and the performers. And I also think just for our organization, I hope that singers in the group and our sort of longstanding audience will get a new idea about what's possible for the group. And I don't mean in terms of quality, because they've always done quality work, but just that we can use our platform, as it were, as artists to really illuminate, pardon me, and to speak on behalf of those who might not otherwise have a voice. And I think that's really exciting. I think any concert gives us an opportunity to do that. But I also think that yeah, it would be great for folks to realize it's possible and to desire that. To say, you know, Cantemus, it's nice if you do something that feels good, but it's also appropriate to sometimes really dig in and, as you said, take that heart journey and do the difficult work. So. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, from a practical standpoint, I hope we expand our audience, you know, that folks who have that point of connection with Anne Frank or know this piece and want to hear it will be curious enough to say, oh, I wonder what Cantemus is going to do with this piece. And, you know, maybe we gain some new audience members from this. So that would be, all these are great goals.
Those are all great goals. And what I take from what you've both been very eloquent about is art is hope and art is growth. And Lord knows we need them both.
Yes.
So, well, you know, just to recap, then the performance of Annalies will take place here in Newburyport on Saturday, January 20th at St. Paul's, my favorite concert venue, by the way, at 7:30 p.m. It will take place in the following day, Sunday, on January 21st in Swampscott at Congregation Shirat Hayam at 4 p.m. For information and tickets, you can visit Cantemus' website at www.cantemus.org. And please note that tickets are free for anyone 21 years old and younger than that. So, Jason, Lynn, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show and talk about this extraordinary piece and your upcoming performance. Just quickly, is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you want to make sure to fit in before we close?
No, I think you've done a wonderful job covering it all. One final thing I guess I would say is that people assume, you know, it's an Anne Frank piece. It's very heavy and weighty, and it is all of these things. But there's also a lot of joy in the piece. There's humor. Yeah. There's certainly drama. So the piece is not a monolith, just as Anne Frank herself was not a monolith. Her writing is very colorful, and I think James and Melanie capture, if not every aspect of her personality, many aspects of Anne's personality, which are really fun to have an experience with. Yeah. And to walk through with her.
Yeah, a lot of different musical styles.
Yes.
You know, it's not all a dirge by any means.
No.
So, Lynn, anything that you wanted to be sure and include before we finish?
No, I think Jason's point about the many colors that you'll hear in the piece, there are, and the musical styles that you just mentioned, there's a place where there's like a little 40s radio moment, and there's a lot of humor and joy for sure. And I hope people will come out and hear this terrific piece.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both again so much. It's just been a joy to talk to you about this piece, and you've both been very eloquent about the piece, and I really appreciate that. Thanks for taking the time to come on the morning show. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today, everybody. Please join us again next Thursday at 9 for the morning show. Till then, be well. And if you're looking for tickets, visit the Cantemus website. You can also buy tickets at the door. All right. Farewell, everybody. Take care.